Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Complete Physio podcast. My name's Chris Myers and we're joined today by a very experienced sports medicine consultant, Dr. George Bownes. George, many thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
I'm really looking forward to this one because it's definitely something that we end up talking to patients a lot about, and we're going to go straight into it. Is running bad for your knees?
No.
Done.
There we go, right. That's it. Stop watching.
So should everybody run?
Almost, yes.
Okay.
However, not necessarily.
Yeah, that's pretty
and
much.
that's why it's a tricky question, right?
Yeah.
Because we get asked, and you guys get asked all the time, is running good for your knees? And the reality is it's an individual piece.
Yeah.
And yes, okay, we could look at the whole population. And there's great projects like the Couch to 5K, the Couch to 10K, which is just encouraging people to be more physically active. So we know that 150 minutes of physical activity a week is the public health recommendation.
Yeah.
And that's moderate activity. So doing something whereby you can have a short sentence conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
Or 75 minutes, if it's really vigorous, you wouldn't be able to hold a conversation.
Yeah. And that could be running, but it could also be...
It could be anything. It could be walking, could
Yeah.
be playing tennis, could be going for a swim, but just being physically active.
Yeah.
And within that, you want to have 2 strength sessions. And over the age of 65, you want to add in 2 balance sessions, which could be something like dancing, for example. Okay, so being physically active is good for you.
Yeah.
Running is often chosen by people because you just put a pair of trainers on and go outside.
It's just easy.
And it's free, isn't it? And you can do it seemingly everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, whether you live in an urban area or in a countryside setting, you can run.
Yeah. So it becomes a very attractive option for lots of people, doesn't it? For their way of getting fit.
Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of people talk about mental wellness and mental well-being, and it's incredibly good for that.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of people do it from that point of view. Yeah. So there's a big positive around running.
Yeah.
As I say, is, you know, individually, is it the right choice for you?
Yeah.
You know, some people are lifelong runners.
Yeah.
And we often see a lot of lifelong runners when they come in with an injury, not necessarily related to the knees, but runners like running and they don't do a lot of cross training and
they don't do a lot of different types of
strength-based
exercise.
training, for example. You know, and that then tends to become an issue for them.
Yeah.
But you know, if the question often becomes, I'm overweight, or I've been physically inactive for a long period.
Because of an injury or because of surgery.
I hate to use COVID as a classic example, but it's just so easy, right?
Yeah.
Your activity levels have dropped because you've maybe had a long-term illness, and then you want to get back into it. But in both those examples where you're overweight or you haven't been active for whatever reason, illness might be one, work might have gone the way, lifestyle with
have a baby,
children, family, all that sort of stuff. It's really, really common. But you're starting in a deconditioned state.
Yeah.
And so if weight loss is your goal, you know, 70% of weight loss is down to nutrition and calorie intake, therefore, and 30% is going to come from activity. Yeah. So there's lots of other bits to think about, because when you are deconditioned and you are overweight or whatever, you know, you're coming to running wanting to get fitter, you're going to load through your knees a lot more. Yeah. And that's where injuries around the knee, whether that's meniscus, whether that's arthritis, whether that's tendinopathy, you're more prone to it. Yeah. So you can use running to improve your fitness and improve your you know, general conditioning, but you probably need to add in other bits as well. Yeah. The off-feet pieces like cycling or swimming.
Yeah. So what we're saying is, so the initial thing is no, running is not bad for your knees, and we would totally agree with that. But it's always that depends. However, actually in your situation, it may or may not be the right thing to do. But the key thing is, what you're saying is that if you've had a period of time off and you're going to go back to running, or you're going to start running, and you gave the example of Couch to 5K, you've got to build it up really slowly to get your body to accommodate for it and to get stronger. And what we see in clinic is people assume running's bad for their knees because they weren't running, they start running and they start to get knee pain. So they're putting the 2 and 2 together. But it's not actually that the running is bad for their knee, it's just that they've started to run too much, too often, too soon, and therefore you need to make sure that you build it up very slowly. So for example, you mentioned the Couch to 5K. if you had a patient in clinic, what sort of general advice would you give to them around starting a running program?
Yeah, I mean, be realistic. You know, the Couch to 5K is done over a long period of time, many weeks. Yeah. You don't have to be a slave to it, because life's going to get in the way and you might not be able to do the session that's 100% programmed. But are you generally following it because it's good advice and it's designed around people who are starting from a low base? Yeah. You know, adding in the cross training is important. One of the other things we commonly see, and related to knees, is you start running, but you bring those old trainers out from the bottom of the, you know, the cupboard.
Or you go the other way and buy the 400 pound wear them once. And
So just thinking that you've got the right bits of kit. You know, the trainer is very important, primarily around just stopping any lower limb injuries, not just the knee. And then, just building up sensibly, but also trying to be looking at that cross-training element as well. Yeah,
and you mentioned strength training as well. And I think that's the bit that we probably take for granted with running. If you look at the forces going through the knee, you know, with the knee, you've got your knee joint, you know, your tibiofemoral joint, and you've got your knee cap. And, you know, it's 5 times your body weight going through your kneecap, 10 times your body weight going through your tibiofemoral joint. So these forces are really high, and I think there is an expectation that anybody can run. But actually running it's a lot of force and it is hard. So I think we just have to be mindful that yes, probably most people can run, but it's not easy. Running is not easy. It's one of the reasons it's such a good exercise for losing weight and reducing, you know, increasing your cardiovascular fitness and reducing other diseases, because it is hard work. It does get you fit, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And healthy.
Yeah, you know, there's lots of studies out there that show that running can be used as part of a longevity process. Yeah. It's also involved in reducing all-cause mortality, so cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, exactly. Curing, you know, helping with mental health management. So it's very, very good at treating a lot of things. Yeah. One of the big things you see around knees, I think, when it comes to running is, we're doing this now. We're sitting here, right? So if we were to just jump up and go for a run, our glutes wouldn't be fired up, our hip flexors are going to be tight, and that's going to cause issues around people's knees. So when you're seeing people come into clinic, you look at their movement mechanics and you're like, oh, well, I can see that that's going to be an issue. Go back to what we're talking about trainers and having appropriate support, because that's your foundations for looking after that knee. Yeah. So the conditioning work that you can do around it is really important.
Absolutely.
To look after them.
Let's look at it a different way. So are there certain clients that you see where they say, well, should I start running, George? Are there certain clients where you go, actually, I wouldn't start with running because X, Y, Z? What are those things that you might look out for?
You generally get that deconditioned person coming in with a knee injury. Yeah. And they've gone and explained, like I was just saying before, where, you know, I want to get back into running, but they haven't really followed a program and they've just cracked on. The difficulty for individuals when it comes to running is, what's your previous history with your knee? You know, have you ruptured your ACL? Yeah. Have you had a long-standing problem with a collateral ligament, or particularly a meniscal tear? Yeah. And so I often describe to patients that your meniscus is like your shock absorber. You know, if you've got a compromised shock absorber like you would have in your car, it might not be the thing for you. Yeah. It doesn't mean that running isn't for you, but you might have to think about what surface do you do it on, what the distances are, how you build up to it, how you manage your knee the day before and the day after. Yeah. But that's not to say that running's bad. It's just that more things need to be thought about when you have more things in the past that have happened to your knee. Yeah, yeah. And the other thing we were talking about before we started this was talking about weight and BMI. And there's some patients that, because they're, you know, slightly overweight, they're going to put a lot of forces through their joints. Their muscles need to be stronger to be able to absorb those forces. Sometimes it can be really worthwhile, in that case, focusing on ways of losing weight first of all, through, as you said, diet, but also some non-impact exercises before starting your running program. Yeah, exactly. And you know, and that's where you go back to the Couch to 5K program or similar, you know, ideas like that. But you know, building back up, you know, running becomes that, right, that's what we're aspiring to get into. You know, we want to go and run, you know, a certain distance. Maybe it's a 10K, maybe it's a London Marathon we just had this weekend. But you just then need to be realistic about how long it's going to take you to get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's not a straight line, and you can get there. You just need to build up.
Yeah, and some people will be able to just go out, start running, have no problems, and some people need a bit more guidance and a little bit more, they need a bit more guidance around what they should specifically be doing for them, particularly if they haven't done it before.
Yeah, and then conversely, if you're a lifelong runner, you did it at school, you enjoy cross country, you continue doing it now, whether that's a park run or something similar. Running has been shown in studies also to be protective.
Yeah.
Which, often gets lost because of the noise around concern that running's not good for you, and particularly for your knee. But we know that it is. So if you're a lifelong runner, we want to make sure that we continue to keep you going on that, because, again, we talk about the positive benefits that it has for you, but also that's physical and mental, and
absolutely.
It all goes with it.
And when you look at these studies, and there's lots of studies out there, isn't there? It's not just our opinion that running is not bad for you. It's also, there's massive studies with even hundreds of thousands of people in that have clearly shown that if you're more sedentary, i.e. you don't run and don't do a lot of exercise, you're actually more at risk of osteoarthritis of the knee than somebody who is a recreational runner or recreational sportsman. So actually, the question is a really important one as to whether running is bad for your knees. Well, actually, the opposite is doing nothing is actually bad for your knees, and we've got evidence to support that.
Yeah, physical inactivity, so that's less than 30 minutes a month, is the fourth biggest killer in the UK.
Less than 30 minutes a month?
Which is a crazy amount. And that's 27% of the adult population.
Wow.
Supposedly. That's public health evidence-based research that moving medicine have looked at. So trying to get people to be physically active, we want to be as positive as possible in that space. Running is one of those.
And that's linked into sort of cardiovascular disease, heart disease, strokes, cancers. Yeah. And when you look at, people always say, what's the best thing you can do for your health?
Move.
And I think the other thing is there'll be people watching this that go, well, I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to do a HIIT class. But that's not what we're saying, isn't it? No, the evidence is clear. It's not even about exercise as in how some people would see it. It's just about moving and walking. And
let's go back to what I said right at the top. 150 minutes a week of moderate activity, that's just for your health. So, if you want to do anything for yourself to look after yourself and have a better quality of life, physically and mentally, moving is the way to do it.
And when you talk about it like that, the running and the knee pain seems a bit more irrelevant, doesn't it? Because it's hang on, what about preventing a stroke? What about getting fit? And actually, everything, and particularly COVID, as you mentioned earlier, has made this very clear. Everything is a risk versus benefit ratio, isn't it?
100%.
And if you look at the benefits of running, for most people that will outweigh the risks of injuring your knee and that sort of thing. But again, the evidence doesn't even show that running does that. I want to pick you up on something you said, that actually running can be protective, and there's evidence to support that. And I think the the way I look at it is, if you want to get stronger and you go to the gym, or you just start doing some weights at home, or you just start lifting at home, and you want to get your muscles stronger, you do exercise, don't you? And I think we can all relate to that. But what I think people find it harder to relate to is that by putting impact through your joints, we're going to talk about bones later on, but actually you have to put impact through your joints to stimulate your cartilage, to stimulate your bone growth. And when it comes to osteoarthritis, those two probably go together, to actually get stronger and be able to withstand the forces to protect the knee joint. And I think, you go to the gym, you stimulate your muscles, you build up weights, you get stronger, and it's exactly the same for the knee, isn't it? And that's probably where this protective element comes in.
Exactly. Your body's constantly turning over. We know this because, your skin's flaking the whole time. And the whole of your body's like that. So you're right, if you don't put the stimulus in, you're going to, use it or lose it. You're not going to have that strength around your joint. People come in with arthritic knees, and you can clearly see the ones that are affected versus the ones that aren't affected, because they haven't got muscle around that joint. So stimulating muscle is important, but also stimulating the bone. The bone's constantly turning over. So protecting cartilage, protecting the joint is really, really important. And doing that Also, that reduces your falls risk when you get older.
Yeah.
Putting more muscle and control around the joint reduces your falls risk, so reduces your chance of having a fracture. The impact of hips, it's all related.
Yeah.
Hip fractures are often, unfortunately, very much associated with elderly people who have fallen, and then very shortly afterwards, can
2 years and 50% die.
Exactly.
I mean, it's
they
so
don't
ruthless.
make it.
Because also it's about, as we get older, you talked about bones and osteoporosis, and that's going to link in with that falls. We see a lot of patients, don't we, that are in that probably 50 to 60 group that are now, we never got this 20 years, are thinking, I might actually start running. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's
but
brilliant.
You've got to be careful with it. But actually, running and exercise there's no doubt that it keeps you young, doesn't it? And prevents a lot of illness.
100%. And, the more that you do it, it's a dose-response curve. The endorphins you get from it, you want to then go and do more of it, but you've got to do it in a balanced way.
Yeah.
Following a program, getting some physiotherapy advice, working with some strength and conditioning people.
Yeah.
Thinking about your mobility. Be that yoga, Pilates that goes with it, and about the control that you've got through the joint.
Yeah.
And the joints above and below, and the whole mechanisms of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody's sitting at home and watching this and going, well, I want to run, but I'm worried I'm going to hurt my knee, because maybe they did it before and they hurt their knee.
Yeah.
What sort of advice in terms of what should people look out for with knee pain, and when should they stop running if they've got concerns?
Well, swelling is a clear one, and most people who come in with a knee problem related to any activity, but particularly from running, is my knee's swollen and I can't actually walk, or I can't actually move, and what have I done? And generally, that involves further assessment and management from there. But I think if people want to get into running, linking in with a physio is a great way of starting that, or joining a club and being part of a group, because the running is a very social aspect. If we look back at, why are we running? We're running because we used to hunt and gather for our food. So, and that's why you go back to, we are all designed with that ability to run. We just choose maybe not to do it.
Yeah.
It's not an activity for everybody, but if you do want to do it, there's ways of getting there. And just having a good team of people around you, whether that's a club, a physio, a sports medicine doctor,
or even just a mate that
someone you just want to take it up with. Go on that journey and get the benefits from it.
Yeah, and the other thing I will often say to patients, because we do see, pain is. Sometimes it's a sign that you're damaging your joint, and particularly swelling is generally a sign that you might have done some damage to the joint. But the other thing is you do get pains when you run, don't you? And I see some people will say, well, if you get pain, you must stop. And in some cases, that is the case. But in a lot of cases, what I would normally say to people, start running. If your pain is at a very tolerable level, say 2 out of 10 on a pain scale, then keep going. If the pain starts to build and get worse, then maybe it's a good idea to stop. And then afterwards, I find that the advice after is the more important thing, is if it swells up, then, let it settle down before you go in again. If it happens again, make sure you see somebody. Or the other thing is, once you've stopped running, really any pain should settle within a couple of hours for you then to go back and try a run, be it in a couple of days after that. And I think if people can follow that, then that can give them a little bit of reassurance that they're not damaging any parts of their body. What in terms of the clientele that you see, I just want to go back to something we talked about. Can you think of a case where and I'm trying to think of a case.
This sounds like a test now.
Where you've said, I wouldn't run. I was trying to think of it earlier.
Okay, this is my analogy. Okay. I saw this interview with Bill Gates.
Right.
And Bill Gates said, I've never told anybody to switch the computer off and sit on again. There's a way of resetting it. There's always something you can do. Yeah. And so in the same way, it's like, have I ever told anybody to not run? Yes, I would have done. But that's where you've come in and you've had persistent swelling and persistent pain, and we've looked into it, and we've found there's something underlying going on. But of a normal everyday piece, no. But that's most likely because you've spiked your load. So you've gone, we talk about acute versus chronic load. So your acute load is what you do in a 7-day period, and your chronic load is 4 weeks. Collectively.
That's a good way of looking at it.
And that's why people need to follow training programs we use the Couch to 5K, but if you're following a, Runner's World guide because you want to run a 3-hour marathon, 3-hour marathon times cause a lot of people to come to clinics.
Good for business.
You get a lot of questions, which is good because people are engaged.
Yeah.
And so that's when you tend to find the problems. And I think going back to what you're just saying there, when I work with elite junior athletes in any sport, it's a lot about education, about being body aware. Like you're saying, what is pain? What is pain? Because it's all personal. What do you experience? What are you experiencing? Tell me about what the problem is in that particular area of concern, and be able to describe it. And the more that you're physically active and the more you'll get then used to pain and different sensations stuff, you can be much more descriptive about what the problem is. And then it's easier to then go, right, you should be running or you shouldn't be running for somebody. I
think one of the areas where you're a sports medicine doctor, I'm a physio, we're always trying to promote exercise as much as we can for obvious reasons that we've discussed. And I'm going to pick on GPs, I'm going to pick on orthopaedic surgeons. So apologies, I don't write in, okay? But
comment below,
but I've done this 25 years. So there is, and I'm sure you would disagree if you want, but there is a group of patients that go to their GP, the GP sends them for an X-ray, say they're 50, 60, it doesn't actually matter what age they are. And you get the report back saying you've got mild to moderate osteoarthritis. The GP then says, you've got mild to moderate osteoarthritis. No, you should stop running. Running's not good for your knees. And we hear this, don't we? Yeah. Despite all the research, we hear this. Yeah. Orthopedic surgeons are, we work with very good orthopedic surgeons, but I have had patients come back and go, yeah, he told me it's probably not best to run. So they've not necessarily said don't run, but probably not best to run, not on that knee. Straight away, that is quite negative, but also there is not the evidence out there to say from an MRI or an X-ray you should not run, because we know that you can have, in fact, if you did an X-ray of most people over the age of 50, 60, a significant percentage of people will have mild to moderate osteoarthritis, but they will have zero pain. So the imaging says one thing, but they've got no pain. And so that means you can have osteoarthritis but not have pain. 100%. So we know that. Yeah. And I think you've probably got experience of it. And I suppose that's one of my frustrations and one of the reasons for doing the podcast is because it doesn't work like that. And the only time I've ever told somebody to stop running is if they've broken their bone, they've got a stress fracture, or they've done a very acute injury that needs rest. But that isn't a lot of the people that we see, is it? We see a lot of people with, I've had pain 2 or 3 months, etc. With those patients, we will then try and build them up to be able to run. Yeah. So, and I think that works quite well. But you must have experience of, hearing it from your patients. Well, I've been told I shouldn't run, it's bad for me.
Yeah, exactly. That's where you've got to appreciate what running is giving that person. Yeah, okay, it's giving them freedom. It's giving them, a bit of time where they can put their phone down and the world isn't going at them, and it gives them mental space and clarity and all the bits that goes with it, and identity as well. For a lot of people. So the why am I running and why running is important to me is a hugely important part of understanding that patient in front of you.
And if you haven't had that conversation with the patient as a clinician, then don't make these comments. And I think you've...
Yeah, exactly. I think
within reason, obviously. There's always the odd cases, but
that's why when I try to explain to patients, and it can be whatever, but we'll talk about, we're talking about the knee particularly today. You've got the history, you've got the examination, you've got some imaging, and then you've got you.
Yeah.
And the you bit is the most important bit, because if you just look at an image, you could have a terrible image, but really good function.
Yeah.
Equally, you could have a really good image.
So you've got a lovely looking
really good image, which is just a bit of early arthritis. Yeah. But let's look at the other joint. Let's look at another 200 joints in your body. And guess what? You've been on the planet for 50 years. You're going to have picked up some changes in your joints. But it doesn't mean it's not good or bad for you. No. The difference between you and another 99 people who are the same age, the same level of experience, is that we've now got a picture.
Yeah.
But that doesn't going to change our advice.
No.
Advice is like, for you, the individual, you want to run, right? What can we do to support you? Is that physio? Is that we're going to think about an injection? Is that going to be, some strength and conditioning work? What is it going to be? But we can bespoke and individualise that care. And that's where, when we were planning this, I was like, is running good? Yes. But, and then you've just got to bespoke it for that individual person. Because you're right, the population, we're used to running historically. That's how we evolved as a species. We've lost that because, we get in the car or we get on a train or whatever, we get on a bike. And so life's changed, but we can get back there and do that.
Makes me think we should do this podcast running, not sitting down.
We should do. Let's
be a bit out of breath, I think. So, and I just want to talk a little bit about the research, and I think it is important, is that for research is very useful, isn't it, to give us general consensus, general ideas. And the general consensus, and it's actually relevant for hip and knee OA, is that if you run marathons, and we're talking about marathons here, people often say, well, yeah, but he's doing marathons or ultra marathons. Well, these people have actually been included in these studies, and it's shown that there is no correlation, so we can say that. The problem with studies is, as you've already alluded to, is it's not about that one individual in front of you. So we can have the general consensus is, whereas 30 years ago, people would think that knee arthritis is caused by running. So the general consensus is it's not, but actually for that one individual, it may, particularly as you've said, if they're overweight. Interestingly, if they have a family history, if they have previous injury. And I think that's one of the things we see a lot in clinic, is because active people are generally active people, aren't they? So they played sport through their teens, their 20s. And actually, one of the reasons they might have arthritis when they're 40 is because they did a partial ACL tear when they were 22. So I think certainly in clinic, we're always very careful, aren't we, to try and get a full picture of that patient to understand their full history. Because it's only once you've got that information, then you can put it in the context in terms of whether it's right for them. Are you a runner, George?
I do love a bit of running.
Do you get knee pain?
I get lots of pain.
Quite typical.
But yeah, no, my knees are right. Actually, to be fair, I was doing a Centurion running event.
Oh wow, so that's a serious running event.
I did the North Downs Way 50 last year, and I did get I found the downhill quite hard, and my left knee did swell quite a lot, which has never happened to me before. But managed it sensibly, and it settled down. That's
interesting, and again, it's all about that bespoke care, isn't it? So I had a patient this morning, and we've stopped them doing all downhill running because it's the one thing that aggravates them, and they live in Hampstead.
Right.
So they've got the hill. They've got the hill. The hill.
It's the only hill in London.
So we've now had to. They love running there, so we've changed their route. And then we will implement it back. But again, that's just a good example with your knee of how. And again, if you didn't have your knowledge, you might go, my knee's swollen up. Running's bad for me. But again, it's quite normal to get these problems, isn't it? But you do have to listen to your body at the same time.
Exactly. And that's why there's so many good people out there to go and get advice from, and so you don't have to sit there on your own and worry about it, or jump on the internet and get some unsolicited advice.
Well, I think that's the other thing is, I was doing a bit of research for this podcast, and there's an awful lot of information out there. To be fair, there's a lot of good information, but that's because I know where to look for good information. I can find some very strong opinions around that running is still bad for your knees. And as we've discussed, that just isn't the case. So in conclusion, is running bad for your knees? No. Could running actually be protective for the knee?
Yes.
However, if you're very overweight, you've got previous knee injuries, a family history, then we need to make sure that if you do start running, that it's done probably under some guidance, or it's done very gently to build up. Would that be a fair synopsis?
Yeah, exactly. You've got to think of it as running is a high impact activity, and therefore anything that's going to increase that load needs to be thought about.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you very much, George.
Thanks for your time.